Hello there, ICS3U folks. Um, this hopefully short talk is on some of the late stages of the system development lifecycle or software development lifecycle. And in mine, right, because we kind of made our own, right? I call them delivery and upkeep, but the things that we'll talk about exist in all of the software development life cycles. Basically, every single one that you could have come up with is going to have some of these items in both of them. I want to talk about the delivery phase here. This is the idea of, you know, the software's been developed, it's been tested and documented, it's ready to go, and then we're going to deliver it or implement it, get it going at the place whoever bought the software. And one of the problems with these big software companies is, of course, they have a system that's running and they want to start using the new system. So how does that happen? Well, there are several ways, and I mentioned these earlier. A direct or a direct, or what they call a plunge. Sometimes it's called the plunge system, where it just on this date you're starting to use the new system. A parallel one is where you're using the old system and then a new system is ran at the same time to make sure there's no problems. A pilot would be, one department or one, in our education system, it might be one school uses the new system. And then once you figure out all the bugs and the problems, then everyone uses the new system. So that's the idea of a pilot. A phased system is when little features of the overall system are implemented, and we're getting used to the new system and all the old parts are getting phased out, phased in and phased out. So that's sort of the in business, in the real world, not just business, in manufacturing. When a huge system is replaced, these are the sorts of things we're going to think about. Um, in this little talk, I'm going to talk not only about the perspective of these huge companies following the SDLC. I want to talk about our perspective as users, and perhaps our perspective as programmers just getting started in our coding lives. Uh, and so we're gonna talk about a few things. Um, how do we get new software? And this is personally, like, in the SDLC, we talked about these huge systems, and of course, if you're a worker in one of those businesses, you kind of have the new system foisted upon you. Or if you're in management of these businesses, you choose the new system. But how do we get new software? If we want to get a new program going, how do we get it? Well, now more often than not, it's an app store, right? We go to the app store and we find. Let's see if I got an app store. Let's see. Yeah, app store, right? We find something that sounds like a productivity tool that we want to use. This is Pages, and we try it out, and then maybe we buy the big version. Of course, often what we'll do is we'll download from a website. We'll just go, we know we want to buy a um, PC word processor, and we just go to the site. WordPerfect, for instance, is what used to be one of my favorites. Now it's not so much, but because there's one reason why it's not my favorite anymore. A $220 piece of software, but we could download it right now. Download, buy, bam, it shows up on your computer in just minutes. And notice you can try these out usually, and sometimes you can upgrade from an old version, and that's less expensive. Reasons to upgrade. And we'll talk about upgrades and updates and patches and all that stuff in this short talk. Um, Other ways that we get software is we can actually go to a store. You buy, and this is what I was used to growing up and in my early adult life. Uh, I'd go, if I wanted a new piece of software, I'd go to a store, and there was all of the choices were at these software stores, and that's happening less and less often. Although you can still see packages on shelves, mostly for old farts like me who aren't used to downloading from a website, perhaps. Another way that sometimes you get new software is it comes with the computer you bought. So there was a word processor on the computer you bought, you're going to use it. Um, Next thing we're going to talk about is, you know, oh, this was my first version of WordPerfect, and I loved it. This is what it actually looked like. This was a screen, WordPerfect 5.1, and notice that this is what the program looked like. And if you wanted to make something, in small font or high font, that was, or fine font, large, small, that it never actually showed up like that. It had these different color codes, and the menus weren't very good. Very rarely you even would have a mouse. So all of these were keyboard shortcuts like Control F and Control E to access the menus. Eventually they got a mouse, but this was my original version of WordPerfect. And how do you learn how to use an old program like this, or even a new program like this? How do you learn to use it? Well, how did I learn? Well, I'll tell you, mostly was online help. Okay, and I'm going to show you the other ones in a second. But did I shut down WordPerfect? I did shut down WordPerfect. I don't think I did. WordPerfect's got a little bit of a glitch in it that, oh, there it is, that sometimes when you have it open in the background, unless it's the first thing, it doesn't even show up in your tray. So this is actually WordPerfect 12. It's the version I have, and we'll talk about versions later. I use this help right there, help topics, and this is how I learned. Also, I learned from not online tutorials. There were very little, but this is how you learn now, isn't it? You click on a YouTube, somebody teaching you how to use a piece of software or whatever. I also learned using manuals, right? There's the WordPerfect 8 manual. It's WordPerfect 12 now, but there was a WordPerfect 5.1 manual somewhere, and it's long gone now, but it helped me learn how to use WordPerfect. What I want to mention, this is how we learn, but in the SDLC, software is sort of put on some, and it might be unique to a company. So there's no online tutorials, there's no manuals, although certainly manuals are something that a company might be asked to produce. Um, how do you learn? And well, there's internal and external documentation. There's these, README files and version release notes, and I'll talk about that in a second. But normally, for these huge systems, whoever actually wrote the code and did all the testing, they would provide the training. They would make sure that people were able to use their software. And then as problems came up, patches, updates, and upgrades are all clearly documented by the company who wrote the code, and usually discovered by whoever was using it. I've got a problem with this software. How do I fix it? And then they got to determine, they being the people who wrote the software, whether it's actually a problem and it's a bug that needs a fix or whatever. Now, before I go on with patches and updates and upgrades, I want to talk about the internal and external documentation. We're used to this one, right? That's our comments. External documentation are things like manuals, but it can be these online helps too, right? This external documentation isn't in the code, the Smart Notebook code itself. It's kind of outside, help files. But we'll also see here, let's see, this is a readme.txt file for some, I forget for which program this, but it talks to about versions. It talks about where to go for the licenses, description, and it's about known problems, screenshots. All these things are to give people information of not only what problems might have had installing the software, where to go for more help, what version it is, that sort of thing. That's usually a little file that comes with your software itself. That's a readme.txt file. Release notes, this is for LibreOffice, and we see this is version 4.3, and we're going to talk about versions soon. But the release notes often say, well, if I've had a patch or if I've had an upgrade or an update rather, what sorts of things have been fixed? And it talks about them all there. And usually a user, um, if I use LibreOffice, I have access to this. Why would I care? I wouldn't really, except for maybe to look for what version has what fixes. But certainly, if you were the people who wrote LibreOffice, you would want to know when a bug was identified and then fixed, so you could find out who fixed it and how they fixed it and that sort of thing. So when I say back in my note that the internal and external documentation, patches and upgrades are all clearly documented. When you write code, every single little fix you make, once you think the program's done, has to be documented so people know what you've done, when, and why. Because often what will happen is a patch in one section might cause a bug in another, and it's an ongoing process. Um, the next thing I want is that yeah. The next thing I want to talk about, and this is just briefly, is this idea of versions. Um, you get a problem, and we need to fix that problem in the software. This happens all the time in big software. Well, if it's something small and immediate, often what you can do is just search online somewhere and you'll be able to find what's called a workaround. A workaround is a quick little way that if you're desperate to get something done using the software, that you could work around the problem to fix up what's going on. And that a workaround is until a patch can be found. And a patch might be a collection of a few little bugs that you sort of put together, and then it runs it in the program and fixes your program. Where an update might be, my favorite I said was WordPerfect 5.1. The major version was WordPerfect 5, but the point 1 is kind of like an update. It updated from WordPerfect 5.0. And upgrades would be, that's sort of the big thing. You upgrade from WordPerfect 5 to WordPerfect 6 or whatever. And, from smallest to biggest, the smallest is a workaround, then a patch, then an update, and upgrades. And all this has to do with something called software versioning. And I'm not going to say too much about it. I'm going to let you do the research. Software versioning is an interesting thing, and I'm going to just be quiet there and let you research. But I am going to show off where or how you could find out what version you've got. Usually, see, this is WordPerfect 12, so that's the major upgrade. The major version is 12, but we can also see there's 12. How many minor updates have we had? 0. How many patches have we had? 0. And this 288, well, that might, and it differs from company to company, but that's probably either an internal build number. So they tried to build the entire program 288 times, and this is the one that they decided to release, and so on. Please don't steal my serial number. This is my version of WordPerfect, and you can't have it. Okay, you've got some questions to answer, and I think that's almost it for lessons in the software development lifecycle. I think we've got some projects to hand in and perhaps a quiz or two to write, and then that's going to be a unit.